And finally, there's the Kuei-jin, Asian vampires that have recently moved into Chinatown and filled it with gacha machines. They use the negative chi formed by gambling, organized crime, and gacha balls to fuel their aggressive business practices. Besides the main story, there's dozens of side missions to complete. None of these are your fetch quests either. They force you to think and decide for yourself how to best approach them. Completing missions is important, since that's your only way of getting the experience points necessary for upgrading your character. Most of them can be resolved peacefully.
Said we're gonna play hard and we're playing fucking hard. Playing hardball.
And whether it's from other vampires or the same dude in a wife beater, copy-pasted 200 times, violence is inevitable. So building your character to be a smooth-talking, anemic slug might not be the best idea. There's a lot of nightclubs in this game, by the way. They're a good place to feed. They've also got some pretty good music. You can also dance. Even outside, there's some very nice ambience to fit the mood. It makes you feel like you're actually there. This game taught me that Santa Monica is a shithole, so don't feel bad about the people you kill there. In a way, you're saving them from the pain of living in Santa Monica. Bloodlines controls quite simply. You play it in first person while interacting with objects and NPCs, and you pan out to third person whenever you're in combat. Combat can be enjoyable, but mostly it is not enjoyable. Combat boils down to mashing left click while desperately scrolling with your mouse wheel and smashing right click to reactivate blood buff. Oh yeah, every clan's got vampire superpowers or disciplines unique to their bloodline. Many of these cost a lot of blood to use, but they're visually impressive, they can end fights instantly, and they break the monotony of endless button mashing while hoping and praying that your enemy's life bar is smaller than your own. You could use guns instead, but unless you've invested skill points into firearms, you might be dead by the time you take a shot. Outside of combat, you'll be doing everything from investigating serial murders to evicting unfriendly spirits out of hotels. The Ocean House Hotel is there to remind you that just because you're a spooky bloodsucker, I'm blowing it. You're not capable of terror. The Ocean House is so infamous that it's got its own console command to skip the entire sequence. It's probably one of the best horror segments I've ever seen in a game, and they managed to do it without a single jump scare, just a feeling of pure condensed dread. Your inventory is conveniently infinite, so you never have to worry about space. You'll pick up useful items like blood bags and firepower, and less useful items like birth control and estrogen pills. This game's difficult, and there's a few frustrating points in the story that might make you quit. Point number 1. Hollywood sewers. At some point in the story, you have to find the Nosferatu, as they've gone into hiding for reasons unknown. This has nothing to do with a 3 billion Tsamisi flesh puppets clogging up every sewer drain, and you're gonna have to fight them all, including this big bitch who throws spare ribs at you. Also, there's no blood down in the sewers, so I hope you brought an entire fridge supply of blood with you. Good luck. Luckily, the unofficial patch fixes this completely. The good old games copy comes with a patch pre-installed, so you can take a convenient shortcut and save yourself the pain of going through this programmed hell. Point number 2. Werewolf Park. In this universe, werewolves are incredibly rare, but they're also invincible killing machines. In fact, you can't fight this puppy at all. It's immune to damage and can stun lock you to death in several swipes. This all happens in a span of 5 seconds, so most players never even get the chance to understand what the fuck is going on before they meet their final death. Again, and again. Even though it kills you in 5 seconds, you're expected to survive for about 5 minutes. Oh, and forget about regenerating your health. Werewolf claws burn through your flesh, so it can't be healed back. However, after years of dying to that same werewolf, I found out you can actually kill it. What the hell? How was I supposed to know that you're actually meant to run into the observatory, flick the circuit breaker outside, run back in, open the dome, lure it into the dome, and crush it to death? How the hell was I supposed to know that? The answer is, I didn't. I had to look it up on the wiki. After years of suffering through the same mission each playthrough, this is oddly satisfying. However, if you can endure past those rough patches in the story, you'll start piecing together what's going on. The concern and focus of every major faction in LA is in one way or another centered on the arrival of a certain archaeological treasure, the Ankaran sarcophagus, which throughout the game has a bad habit of getting stolen. What's inside? Who knows? An old Assyrian king or a slumbering antediluvian, one of the oldest granddaddy vampires out there, who, if you traced your blood far back enough, might be one of your original fathers. Half a city believes the latter. They also believe that the moment Father Dearest wakes up from his slumber, he's gonna be hungry. Real hungry, and he'll sate that hunger by feasting on his children. Wherever we go, it is the blood of Cain which makes our fate. Your fate and the fate of the Ankaran sarcophagus are inescapably intertwined. Will you open up the sarcophagus or seal it away for all eternity? That choice is up to you. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, a very unique, flawed, and fantastic diamond of a game. Terrible combat, 0 out of 10. As always, more content to come, so stay tuned. Now I'm just fucking with you. 10 out of 10. One of my favorite and one of the most replayable RPGs of all time. There's very few games out there that keep pulling you back over and over again and still manage to make each playthrough different, and this is one of them. Go buy it. Go play it. You won't regret it. Get sucked into the atmosphere. Get a craving addiction for it and replay it every few years for the rest of your natural life, because there's nothing quite like it. A warm thanks to the many members of the Merchants Guild, generously funding and bankrolling these videos. You're all truly wonderful.
You're going to get a visitor at your door next week. Don't open door! You Jehovah Witness! They're so annoying!
Hey, I could use a Halloween-looking S&M gremlin like yourself to help haunt some people out of some loot for me.
Let's see what we got on good old camera 3. Oh, well,
Oh, you're the
there.
fucking 4, dude. Get the
I've been
fuck
thinking
out of
about
here.
You. Oh, yeah. I want to lick you all over. Then make my way down to your creamy center and... What the... Get your hands off my Bavarian cream!
You going to go to fancy restaurant. You going to order snail.
Hey people, Seth
Fuck that
in
up.
your leg. Power always was on giving. Forbidden love they had, and amputating your leg into your own people. Lose your money, go heavily into debt, borrow money from the Jews, consider paying them back. Keep it instead by expelling the Jews from your country. Don't feel bad about it. We've been expelled so often, you really won't hurt our feelings if you do it again. Marry your sister. Divorce your sister because she's too old. Marry her daughter instead. Turn your family tree into a family circle, and watch your dynasty burn to the ground as your children collect every chromosome known to man. Of course, I'm talking about the most prolific, complex, and intricate medieval incest simulator on the market today, Crusader Kings 2. Crusader Kings 2 is a game covering nearly 700 years of human history, during which time we treated each other very, very well. Religious tolerance was at an all-time high. Human life was short and painful, and the man amputating your leg could probably also trim your beard. In other words, the good old days. But with modern technology, those good old days can be experienced all over again from the perspective of a single person you pick from the world map, who is then forced to live through your terrible decisions. CK2 falls under the definition of grand strategy, which might lead you to believe it's a strategy game. In truth, grand strategy is neither grand nor strategic. You just paint the map with color crayons and then upload your meme image of a Holy Roman Empire onto Reddit for those sick upvotes. Grand strategy is to strategy what Doom is to the field of literature. Doom is not a very good book. In fact, it's not a book at all. So don't feel intimidated. This game is actually just a very simple Excel spreadsheet with a lot of poor UI scaling. But that's not the point of it. The point is the characters, which behave as uncontrollable agents of chaos that act and react to everything you do, often in the most unpredictable, illogical, and insane way possible. In other words, they act exactly like humans. But what is your objective in Crusader Kings 2? Well, the same objective as every human being. As Oscar Wilde once said, everything in the world is about sex. Except sex. Sex is about power. Power is what you're ultimately trying to gain. And in the medieval world, there are only two ways of reaching that power: war and marriage. Essentially, you're sleeping your way to the top, and in the process, you pray you don't get poisoned, cucked, or inbred before your genes can pass on to the next generation. If you fail to preserve your bloodline, your dynasty ends and the game is over. You can't just pass on your genes, you gotta look after them too. Unless, of course, your seduction skills are so high that every woman in a 100-kilometer radius is already knocked up with your kids. Children aren't exactly the best at staying alive. Your child could be killed during a mass archery incident by some madman armed with an automatic crossbow, or simply smothered by his own pillow, by his own mother, holding the pillow. So, much like stocks and investment, I recommend diversifying your assets. Luckily, the same applies to your potential rivals. One of my favorite things in this game is performing late-term abortions. Now, infanticide is not something I support. It's something I recommend. Remember, if you can't kill your enemies today, you can still destroy them tomorrow. Whether or not your dynasty can survive entropy and uncertainty will depend on how tactfully you can balance the needs and wants of your realm, which is completely impossible. Your vassals always want more land, your wife always wants more jewelry, and your brother always wants more of your wife. Try to satisfy everyone, and you'll end up satisfying no one, which is why the secret to a long reign is disposing of everyone who doesn't like you. After that, you're safe, secure, and absolutely at the mercy of this game's RNG system. Aside from conscious actions, schemes, and intrigue, this game is actually played by hitting the spacebar and letting time flow by. What does time hold in store for you? Surprises. A lot of surprises. And you're gonna hate every single one of them. 99% of the gameplay is based on random events. Some are good, some are bad, and you're completely powerless to stop them. Having a great time? Not anymore. You've got the plague, you've got syphilis, you've got lover's pox from sleeping with your maid. What do? Well, the only thing you can do, put your trust and faith in your doctor and hope for the best. Also, execute your maid for giving you an STI. The doctor manages to cure your plague. A miracle. But the syphilis? That's gonna be a gift that keeps on giving. Thank your doctor. Then execute him for incompetence. Order a new doctor. He's insane, paranoid, and probably a spy from Imperial China. But you know what? He might just be the guy for the job. It turns out he wasn't the guy for the job, and two of your direct heirs are now dead. They found rice grains in their chamber, but no conclusive evidence. Oh well. Anyway, your spy master informs you that your doctor is trying to murder you. You confront him and make him feel very guilty about it. He agrees to stop trying to murder you. More of your children end up dead. Also, while you were battling a lifelong struggle with STIs, your wife was having an affair with your other wife. You've got two actually. God bless being a Muslim. Luckily, lesbianism is no risk to your dynasty. Yes, in Crusader Kings 2, having a homosexual wife is probably the best decision you could possibly make. But it doesn't save you, because your doctor just saved you from a life of sexually transmitted disease by killing you with a lethal dose of Chinese herbal remedies. So, try hard as you might, all your efforts will eventually come to ruin. You'll get cucked, and then you die. Quit the game, and start again. Ultimately, you're playing Crusader Kings 2 for the journey, not the outcome, and the stories you create in the process are unique to your experience. No game will go quite the same, which is why there's no reason for me to explain mechanics. Instead, let me share some stories. Once, I played as Charlemagne, king of the Franks. After my brother died of entirely natural causes, I was left to think on how I would conquer the rest of Europe. However, RNG interrupted my schemes. Just like that, I woke up one day, and I was gay. Most unfortunate. However, fortunately for me, another man of immense power was simultaneously struck with homo-lust, the Pope. And so, I seduced the Pope. Pope Stephanus III was an utterly geriatric recluse, but I knew deep down inside his soul, he was just misunderstood. I wrote him a romantic poem. Roses are red, violets are blue. I like penis, and so do you. My words reached him and had their intended effect inside his heart. And soon, I was inside the Pope. The church was oblivious to our forbidden love. They had no idea old Stephanus was aching for more than just back pain. Turns out, it was very advantageous to have the Pope as your lover. Any piece of Catholic land I wanted, he granted, in exchange for French sausage, I received the entire Christian continent. And that's the historically accurate account of how Charlemagne took Europe, by taking the Pope's ass. In another game, I played as the Polish because I enjoy being abused by my enemies and my supposed friends who need more land. How much more land? Well, however much I had. Luckily, the bubonic plague began to ravage Europe. I lost most of my territory from before, so I didn't feel too bad about it. My peasants and their livelihood were now somebody else's problem. Meanwhile, myself and my court went into hiding. The gates were shut, the keys were thrown away, until all of this boils over. However, we had another problem. Food. Or the lack of it. I didn't really think about that. I assumed every kingdom in the Middle Ages just had a Tesco Express around the corner. So we waited, we starved, and then we found an amazing solution. Why not eat the rest of a court? I mean, they're not working anyway, so we did just that. And it was entirely sustainable because I kept repeatedly inviting beautiful women to join my court, to be consumed by the court. I'm not proud of what I did, but I did what I had to, which it turned out was completely unnecessary. Apparently, Poland was not affected by the Black Plague, and I sort of just freaked out and ate a lot of innocent people for absolutely no reason. Look, I'm not very good at this game. Luckily, such horrific events are unlikely in modern times because of modern healthcare and sanitation. However, if a plague did have to start somewhere...
Would you like to say a few... Well, would you like to say a few words about, our mold?
Yes, stop filming it. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, but you know, I'm not the one responsible for you guys leaving organic matter for so long that we have fluffy organic matter.
Well, I was about to get rid of it until you put it on display for the world to see. Now let me...
That would definitely be inside my friend's apartment. For my last game, I decided to break history and play with custom parameters. I designed it so every country was ruled by teenage girls aged 14 and over. It was pure chaos. It was a period of intense suffering. Also, I later found out I forgot to turn off Great Conquerors, so eventually, most of the known world was overrun by Genghis Khan and her teenage sorority. Luckily, she mostly left me alone. Unfortunately, even if I got a matrilineal marriage, heir succession laws would mean that any child I produce might try and overthrow me. I was screwed, figuratively. But once again, RNG tossed me a bone. Through intense meditation and satanic rituals, I became immortal. On the other hand, I also became an insane lunatic. And one day, in the style of Caligula, I replaced one of my counselors with a horse. I was infatuated, yet I couldn't marry him. Our legal system was not advanced enough to consider human-horse relations. More importantly, the game didn't let me, so I used an exploit. I made my horse a bishop, and in the process of turning my pony into a priest, he automatically filled an entire kingdom with horses, which somehow could be married. So I married and made love to a horse, producing an entire royal line of children that had no concern for the decadent ways of man. They were pure and majestic. Their only concerns were eating carrots and shitting on the streets. At this point, my queen was like a bakery because she was getting bread. There's many stories to tell, but you get the general idea. Every game you ever play will start
Some of these
with
games seem great,
sincere
dude.
intentions, which will inevitably be corrupted and reduced to the most depraved and malicious acts you could ever conceive. But hey, it's fun. Of course, no game like Crusader Kings 2 is complete without multiplayer and friends, which always ends with everyone sleeping with your wife. This happens so often that I sleep with everyone else's wife just in case.
Sounds like Seth has fucked every man's wife at the moment, so...
I'm only fucking 3 men's wives.
That's because there's only 3 men available in this fucking country.
Multiplayer is great. Some of the best shenanigans take place in multiplayer, and luckily, only the host has to have the 3 billion DLC packs necessary to make this game playable. The base game, much like a woman in her mid-40s, is a bit barren. You really need the DLC to add some basic features that should have been in the base game. I think CK2 is a wonderful game, but it's also a game published by Paradox, which is why, even though I love it, I can't recommend it, because the whole damn thing costs around anything from $120 to $200. With that same amount of money, you can satisfy your daily caloric intake for 17 to 28 days on nothing but dollar menu cheeseburgers from McDonald's, one of the most basic and essential components to human life. But if you've got the money to spare, go for it. Or just marry marry someone rich. Most people do it for a visa. You can do it for video games. Alternatively, there are ways to obtain the DLC. Southeast London, hole in the wall. Take the USB stick and don't look back. If you do, run. If you hesitate, I'm not responsible and I don't know you. Good luck. And if you're not fully satisfied, don't worry. There's an entire modding community out there to fix all your issues. And it's not too difficult to mod the game yourself. In my case, I was getting PTSD from all the death sounds, which play each time a family member bites the dust. Which, well, have a listen for yourself. I think you'd agree these are a little bit unnerving, so I replaced every death sound with a bass-boosted sound clip of Lego Yoda. Now this is much more soothing to the ears. I don't even mind when people die now. It sounds great. Final score. I hope you enjoyed reading this essay as much as I enjoyed writing it. After playing this game for so long, I finally figured out its purpose. The primary goal of Crusader Kings 2, and perhaps life itself, isn't about living a good or bad life. It's about living an interesting life, and inevitably, to die an interesting death. So, you can loudly proclaim on your deathbed, "Thank God, I didn't waste it all on a boring life." Once you're dead and buried, you won't just be a footnote in Hey people, Seth here. Are you tired of the stressful world of modern video games? Do you want something a little more relaxing? Well, this isn't the game for you, because it's been 5 minutes since you checked the religion tab, and Osiris, to put it lightly, is quite upset. Better build a dozen shrines and beg forgiveness. Get cursed anyway. Lose all your crops. Go into an endless feedback loop of famine, which leads to emigration, which leads to more famine. Because once you start the cycle, you don't have enough workers to stop it. Go into debt. Pay interest on your debt. Go bankrupt. Refuse to give up. Rebuild your finances. Rebuild your faith. Rebuild your city. And then learn about the interesting life cycle of grasshoppers, which, at a certain population density, pump huge amounts of serotonin and transform into locusts. Lose all your crops again. Quit the game and swear you'll never play again. Welcome to Pharaoh. Released 20 years ago by Impressions Games, Pharaoh is considered as one of the most developed, functional, and unforgiving of city builders. To play, you need to rename your music folder and manually play the music on shuffle and repeat, because otherwise it's gonna crash in 5 minutes. Otherwise, it runs pretty damn good on modern spyware. It doesn't use many resources, so I can focus my CPU cycles into sending my personal information to the CCP. To play the actual game, you need to make a family line, a dynasty to follow and develop across the historical progression of a campaign, from the earliest foundations of civilization on the Nile Valley to the triumphant heights of its golden age. It's a lot of fun. It's also deceptively simple, and quickly ramps up in difficulty and complexity until any faith you ever had in your city planning abilities are completely wiped out, leaving only a deep-seated feeling of anguish, despair, and incompetence. Don't worry, I've been there. When I built myself a personal mansion and paid myself a pharaoh's salary, thinking that somehow I outsmarted the Egyptian monetary system. Only later did I realize I wasn't making money. I was taking money from my own treasury to pay myself so I could put it back into my own treasury. My profound economic genius did not go unnoticed, because in several months' time, the real Pharaoh attacked my city to save my people from extreme retardation. In the beginning, your only concerns are food, water, and preventing your mud hut from spontaneously combusting. In ancient Egypt, most forms of architecture have a habit of exploding into blazing fireballs that will eventually consume your entire city. Historians attribute this to the fact that Egypt is closer to the sun. As such, every street corner requires an architect and a fire station, because without them, in a few milliseconds, my city will look like this. Your needs grow with the people, and you always need more people to run the city. This process is encouraged by the fact that as you satisfy their needs, dwellings will upgrade automatically, both visually and mechanically, as they accommodate wealthier residents. Your reward for a well-managed city is a city that doesn't look like shit. So, unless you want to stare at mud huts all day, we need to talk about the essentials of Egyptian life. Ancient Egypt invented many great things, such as crime, and punishment. The mark of an advanced civilization is a police station. Unfortunately, Pharaoh was an older game in the series, which still worked on the principle of employers having to manually find their employees. This means they have to walk out, and if they don't find any housing, they can't access the labor pool. In the residential sector, this is no problem. In the industrial sector, I don't have an easy way of saying this, but I am compelled by the mechanics of the game to form a ghetto. Yes, there's more ethical ways to reach the workforce, but it's far easier and more convenient for me to simply gentrify the population centers. After all, what do they have to complain about? Jobs are plentiful, taxation is fair, and undisclosed income will be recovered one way or another back to the better part of a city. One of the most central parts of life in ancient Egypt was religion. Each city recognizes a number of different gods, and they demand worship. There's obviously more, but in Pharaoh, you worship one of the big five: Osiris, Ra, Ta, Set, and Bast, which respectively control the flood, the kingdom, pottery, destruction, and secondary toxoplasmosis transmitted by your cat. Make them happy, and you'll get a blessing. That usually helps your city, unless it's a blessing from Ta. Don't worry, mortal, I've resupplied your workshops. What's that? You don't have a weaver, jeweler, or shipmaker? Well then, my work here is done. Oh, that's a nice empty storage yard you have there. I'm gonna fill it with clay. Appeasing the gods isn't easy. You'll need to develop OCD and check the religion tab every few seconds to see how long you have until the next meltdown. Gods have to be honored by throwing festivals as often as physically possible. You see, the only way to delay divine punishment is getting shit-faced and drinking copious amounts of alcohol. When you vomit, Osiris smiles. Don't be surprised. Ancient Egyptian mythology is very colorful, and I think that's best depicted in the Osiris myth. Most of my retelling comes from the Plutarch account, which has its own issues, but we largely had to piece this all together. Ancient Egyptians believed that words carried power, so the more negative or unsavory parts of stories were often never recorded, because simply writing them would manifest the words into reality. Anyway, it goes like this. Osiris rules over Egypt. Set didn't like that, so he invites him to a dinner party, during which he loudly proclaims there's a gift at the end. It's a chest, but he'll only give it to whoever fits inside. Every guest tries the chest, but none of them fit except Osiris. As he hops into the chest, Set and his goons lock him inside, decapitate and dismember him into 42 pieces, and throw him downriver. Osiris's grieving wife Isis and his side hoe Nephis team up to find the missing pieces, including his dismembered penis. In one version, they find everything except his penis, which has, of course, been devoured by a fish. This may explain the lack of fish in ancient Egyptian diets, probably because, as far as they were concerned, they were dick eaters. Isis naturally asks Thoth, god of magic, to make him a new penis instead, the dimensions of which were never stated. At this point, they preserve the body, making him the first mummy. Then Isis posthumously bangs Osiris's undead body and gets knocked up. However, Osiris is incomplete, so he pieces out and goes on to become king of the afterlife. Isis gives birth to Osiris's son, Horus. In the meantime, Set has usurped control of the kingdom. That is, until Horus grows up and challenges him for the throne of Egypt. This takes almost 80 years, during which they transform into hippos and bite the shit out of each other. Isis attempts to intervene and harpoon Set, but accidentally stabs her son instead. In a perfectly natural response to your mom accidentally harpooning you, Horus decapitates his mother. Don't worry, it's not fatal, as Thoth steps in, slaps the stump, and replaces it with a head of a cow, which is why Isis is often depicted so. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, Set sexually assaults Horus. I mean, we went from dick-eating fish to this. Did you really think it would be safe for work just because it's Egypt? Let me give you some context. Ancient Egyptians believed semen was a very potent substance. In other words, poison. Set came inside Horus, which made him physically ill, and made Set a homosexual, except no homo, because it's all about power dynamics and mental gymnastics with these people. Horus survives because he caught the semen. With what? With his hands, of course. I imagine he just slapped it away. Then Isis straight up puts Horus's semen on lettuce. Man, don't judge, okay? find you a mom that cares. Find you a mom that'll help you prank your friend by putting a little extra seed in his salad. Set consumes the cum cabbage and gets impregnated by his rival. Set loses the throne of Egypt, and Horus takes his rightful place on the throne because, well, after eating another dude's nut, getting your own torn off, and tearing out his eyeballs only to proverbially give birth to them once again is kind of a low blow to your reputation. And that is the Osiris myth. And bet they never teach that shit in schools. It's also relevant because Pharaoh is seen as the physical incarnation of Horus. But back to religion. The gods are fickle. You've got local deities and you've got your patron god. Local deities need temples or they get pissed. If a local deity has more temples than another, the other one gets pissed. If the number of temples for each local deity and the patron god are identical, the patron god gets pissed. Satisfying the gods is a delicate balancing act of wasting all your money on temples but never spending too little or too much that they get jealous and burn your city to the ground. Aside from the spiritual need for faith, your people have a physical need for entertainment. This is where being illiterate really hurts. If you haven't read tutorials, you'll know how to place the entertainers, but no idea how to place the venues. If it shows red, that's because your road is wrong. But how do you make it right? Well, as a child, I made every road shape possible until finally one of them snapped in place and became green. Once you've got that down, entertainment is sorted. Look at them. Not a phone in sight. Just people living in the moment, dying of malaria. Unless you want your entire workforce to be wiped out by a plague, consider implementing universal health care everywhere except the ghetto. Insurance coverage doesn't extend to my work camps because the cheapest cure for malaria is to delete the household, which is a good time to mention that if you right-click on someone...
Oh, my stomach. Oh, my head.
They'll tell you their personal feelings about the city.
I can't find a place to live.
At any given time.
I've been kicked out of my home and through no fault of my own.
Advance further and your people will demand more. Pottery, beer, recreation, education, a working legal system to complain about the state of police brutality. And if you give them enough of these goods and services, they'll turn into nobles. Say goodbye to half your workforce because these guys don't do heavy labor, but their estates are absolutely beautiful. Pharaoh was a very aesthetic game, and it still is. You've got a lot of options for beautification, from plazas to gardens to statues you can choose and rotate by pressing the R key. Primarily, you're going to use them to inflate property values, but there's also another lesser known purpose to statues, dealing with wild animals. Normally, the only response to an animal fatality is police brutality. If an animal is not beaten, a citizen gets eaten. However, you can block off predators by surrounding them with several dozen pickle sphinx statues. This method only applies to members of the animal kingdom, which doesn't include water demons. Do you know how many police officers it takes to kill one hippopotamus? I tested this. I lose 5 men for every hippo. I could send in the army, but then they run to water and toggle God mode. I've learned to accept that there's nothing I can do about this, except increase the music volume